workforce coordinator there. And that first top sheets there, the slides are kind of what I'm going to go through. So I know you have to leave early. You can definitely have something to go back to and look at. But so kind of the basics, I guess what they want me to talk today about is how to put a resume together, what that looks like, what are the important things to have in there. And there's also a brochure in that packet that has our website in there. So it's eddyworks.nebraska.gov. And we have a wizard that you can put your resume on. It's just ask you the question, you put in the answer. It asks you a question, you type in the answer, and then it formats it for you into the resume. So it kind of gets you thinking. There's also a website that I wanted to mention that's called onetonline.org. And that website is a free website that you can go to that, again, back to the federal governments, they have put in all types of job descriptions in there. So you can do a search and what type of work that you have done or what type of work you want to go into, and it's going to be able to tell you what the job tasks are, what type of skills you would need, what type of degree you would need. But so to build your resume, how you could use that is the job tasks. And I always say the wordsmithing of, you know, we're not repeating ourselves over and over and over of how do I word this when we go through that. So those are two resources. So my first thing is, what is the initial amount of time an employer takes to review an applicant's resume?
2 minutes. No, I'm not going to give you that. 30 seconds. Yeah.
What did you say?
I said 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
And what would you say? 30 seconds. Okay. For everybody that answered. Whoa, and I can't throw. I usually preface that. I throw like a girl because I am a girl. I do not have a softball arm. It's actually the national average of what the statistic is 6 seconds.
No way.
Wow. So they're looking at the contact information, they're going down to the very next line, whether that's your education or your ability skills, what that looks like, and they're deciding pretty quick. I know. So using some things, you know, when I used to do it, I had 85 resumes sitting in front of me, and I had my yes pile, my no pile, and the type of job, I wasn't HR, so I didn't have that time. It's like I'm managing, you know what I mean, another position that I've got to either cover and or I'm getting somebody else to cover, so it's kind of one of those, you have that pressure. So I'm just wanting to tell you the realities of somebody looking at your resume is sometimes they're pressed up against that time. And if there's a misspelling, if there's, I mean, I've seen hot mama, you know, at gmail.com. Really? Yeah, no. Because of the position that I'm looking at, hot mamas aren't going to be welcome in my office. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I have that priority and prerogative to be able to look at that. So that piece of paper, and that's where that 6 seconds, you know, if it's something within there that intrigues them, they're going to be moving on down the line, you know, if you've gotten past kind of that point. So it's just really important to, even within that contact information, what does that look like for a person? Okay, so why do you need a resume? Obviously, it's a marketing tool. And just to spend a little time on this, it's that part of, I think in our minds, sometimes I don't want to brag about myself. You know, a lot of us are good old Nebraskans, and, you know, we've been taught to be humble, and now all of a sudden on a piece of paper, I have to brag about my abilities, and, you know, and we all know that one person that can do that really well, right? But how many people and how many of us are like that really can market ourselves? So it is time that you want to take and spend on, have somebody else look at, read, go over, because it is that marketing tool for you. Like I said, 85 that I would have sitting there, and I've got one position to fill, right? So you want to be that one that stands out, that at least makes it to the yes pile to get to the interview. So it is an important piece of paper. So obviously it's to obtain the interview, and of course the requirement of the employer. So what is a resume? It's that document that tells prospective employers exactly what you want them to know about you, okay? And why you would be a good fit for their position, and advertise your skills in an easy to read, logical, and concise format. I know that's really basic, but sometimes people are like, why do I have to do a resume? You know, why can't I just get that interview and have that conversation with them? Because I know I can sell myself. Well, we got to get through that first step of doing that. So what does your resume say about you? If it's well organized, error-free, and professional in appearance, it says about you that you're well organized, attention to detail, and careful and competent. Now, I'm going to tell myself on this part of the error-free piece, okay? I love to talk. I like to have a great conversation, but sometimes in that whole grammar piece of me trying to get in there and get it going and how much do I say and what do I not say. I have a really good friend that is a teacher. And guess who I'm calling to say, hey, could you look over my resume again? It's just getting those different eyes on it to help you go that way. I'm not always error-free, and nobody ever is, right? I mean, we're all going to make mistakes. But knowing that about myself, that I need to have somebody else looking it over and going over it for me, that's okay. It's still going to show them, presenting to them, you have that attention to detail. So don't think that you have to be this perfect person to be able to put that on a resume, but how do you use the tools, I always say, in your tool belt of your weaknesses? Going through your resume, do that. Okay, so I don't know if we'll go through this, just because of time, but so the resume's do's, action verbs, do you remember what those are? It's the active, responsible, maintained, not I type of thing. But you're going to use short, concise sentences. Back in the day, I know there's some here that people are as old as probably that I am, and we were taught to do nice paragraphs, and putting that in there. But now we're bullet form. We are in a day and age where we can flip with our phone through information, but you wanted a concise sentence, but detailed enough. So scrolling or going to the next line and using the second line is okay. You just don't want it to go to the third and the fourth and the fifth. Does that make sense? So you're going to bullet each task that you do as you go through, and I'll show you an example a little bit later. That easy to read format. So what's your degree?
General.
What is it?
General.
General studies. Okay. So I'm thinking of maybe just some different areas, like if you're a tattoo artist and you're going to go into or graphics or that kind of thing. Sometimes they want to busy their resumes. The first part of your resume is always going to be professional. What I'm saying, it's not going to have any of that graphic stuff on it. You want a website for that or a book for that type of thing, but that first page of the resume is going to be that. So easy to read. And keep it to one page if you can, no more than two. And of course, that's going to depend on your work experience. There are some people that obviously have a little bit more than that, and you need to have that in there to be able to get the job. It's okay to go to the second page, but if you can keep it to one, that's good. So the don'ts, do not use pronouns such as I, me, and my. So like I was saying, those action verbs is what you want to use. Do not include references. And my example in that is I was at Safeway one day after work trying to get to volleyball, trying to get to football, kids different, and I had a friend that was managing and saying, hey, got a reference for so-and-so, and I'm standing there going, oh my gosh, I couldn't think of this person, because my mind was somewhere else. We're a small community, and so they could bump into, your references could bump into, and then I wasn't a very good first impression for that person. Finally, when it came to my mind of who that was, it's like, oh yeah, and then I'm calling that person back and going, oh, I remember you caught me at a bad time. But small towns, that can happen. Second of all, is we want them to talk to you first. I have worked with people that have actually called the references first before they've even talked to the person that they wanted to interview. And so unless they're telling you that they're going to do that, you know what I mean? That's fine, and you've prepped them and you've done your kind of beforehand work. But really, you want to be the person to be able to sell yourself first and then to have that conversation with your references. So, do not clutter your resume with non-essential information. Do not make misrepresentations. That's the biggest thing. So when you're wordsmithing and you're putting all of your, what you have to offer within, you do not want to inflate what you truly know. Are you going to be, do you think, working in Nebraska?
Most likely.
Okay, so Nebraska is what we call an at-will state. So that means that they can fire you without telling you why at any point in time. Now, some businesses do have some great protocols and policies that they might say, might give you a verbal first, they might write you up, do some coaching, because they understand it costs money to actually hire you, okay? But there's a lot of places that just, okay, so if you misrepresent yourself and you've said that you can do something that really you can't they have grounds to let you go. And they don't have to tell you why, they can just let you go. So don't misrepresent. Be truthful in what you can do, what your skills are, and what that looks like. And then even more so in the interview. You know, if there's something that you want to explain that you were able to put in there, and okay, you can't write a whole paragraph about it, but you get into that interview, that's a perfect time to be able to have that conversation as well. And don't include your personal information, your social security number, age, sex, height, weight, marital status, and photograph. Well, not photographs, but that's actually illegal for them to even, you know, ask those questions of you. And photographs is something, you know, you just see sometimes people put their cheery little smiley face on there. And you know, you're a very beautiful young woman, but you just don't know what people's preconceived notions of if I saw you and how old you are. I might say, you know, I'm kind of looking for a 35-year-old. I'm not going to say that out loud because it's illegal for me to do. But it really does happen kind of inwardly sometimes. They know, does that make sense of what experience they want and that kind of thing. So even a picture, it's just something that you just don't even want to move forward with. Really, even here recently in a lot of different readings that I'm doing, and in the bigger cities, so it's probably up to you of what you want to do, is a lot of people aren't even putting their mailing address on there. They're putting their phone number and their email address. And it's just, we live in a different world, you know, of how much information do I want out there of where I'm living, you know, type of thing. So that's going to be, you know, up to you of what you want to do, but that's just another thing to think of. Okay, so that header, what should it be included? Your name, your permanent address, and that's, of course, whether you want to have it or not. Your email address, we talked about that, creating one that's professional. It's your first and last name. I had a gal that came in the other day, and I was helping her with her resume, and her nickname is Jugsy. And so she wanted to, that was her email, you know, and I was like, just tell me what I think it means. Oh, wait a minute, don't answer that question, you know. I was like, and she's like, well, that's just my nickname, and everybody knows me by that. Well, okay. So let's get a professional, you know, email that we've got on there, because you could highly offend. And again, that's even less than 6 seconds. You know, you're 2 seconds into it, and there's no, you know, I don't want somebody that's their nickname working for me. So, and then your telephone number. What I'm going to say about this telephone number, I know because my kids are in college and now graduating from college, is they don't set up their voicemails. Set up your voicemail. Because when I would call, and, you know, I don't know, I'm just going to call you Susan. I don't want to say your name, but, you know, if I'm just getting you that automated, you have reached, you know, da 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 da, or just leave me a message. Okay, I don't know if I've really got Susan, and I'm trying to offer or extend to you an interview. Does that make sense? So you want a very, it doesn't have to be long. Don't give me the ringtone of, you know, oh, work. You know, I don't want to listen to all that, you know. Give me just, hello, you have reached Susan's cell phone. You know, please leave a message and I'll get it back to you as soon as possible. Short and sweet. That's all it needs to be, okay? So they can get a hold of you. Check your voice messages as well, because boy, I did in my top how many that I would have in my yes pile. And if I extended a phone call to that person and I could not get through because their voicemail was full, no, I don't have time to be following up on you. Do you know what I mean? If you really want a job to me, now you might talk to somebody else and they got more patience than that, you know? And so it really, you're working also with the personality of that manager, of that supervisor. Does that make sense? So we just want to take out all those barriers that keep your voicemail free so they can leave you that message. Just say, give me a call back, you know, I want to extend an interview. Okay, so where should your contact information go? At the beginning of the page or at the top of the page? You know, I've seen some kind of more creative ones where sometimes they're on the side. If it doesn't get too busy, that's the issue. It's like, okay, so now I'm in the bifocal world. And, you know, and sometimes, I mean, seriously, huh? You read some of these resumes, it looks like ant print going across the page because they're trying to get a lot of information on there. And they're using a size 6 or size 8 font. And you're like, really? Okay, so now I just got done coaching somebody out on the floor, and now I got to come back in and read this? No. You see what I'm saying? And where even that kind of stuff could just irritate somebody enough to go, I don't want to read this. So make it clear, concise, have somebody else, and a couple people read it and say, tell me what you think just of the visual piece of this. Is it too busy? Is it too gaudy? Is it too much? You know, so reading. I've used a very simple example, but skills and abilities. On this piece here, I'm going to condense it into one. So your skills and abilities, tell me something that is about you. The objective statement used to be a thing that, you know, that you would use at the top of your thing, and it used to say what I wanted, okay? And the trend has now swung to, I don't care what you want, tell me what you bring. Tell me what you have to offer me. And that's going to get you that interview. Does that make sense? And so, okay, so 2 years of customer service experience. You're going to tell me down below in your employment history that whether you were a barista, a retail sales at the bookstore, whatever it is, you know, that you did your customer service experience in. But give me just a real quick general, you know, how many years have you done that? Does that make sense? Because that's going to set you apart then maybe from, again, the other 85 you got sitting there of what that looks like. Okay. And then, of course, you can go down into don't misrepresent yourself, but really tell me about yourself and your personality. We usually say 5 to 8, but try not to be too familiar. I don't know how many resumes I looked at that's a detailed oriented, a good communicator. You know, really tell me something about you, what truly you bring to the table. Okay. And there we go. Be specific about what you bring to the company. Okay. Experience, what's considered experience is the full and part-time jobs, self-employment. And I will give you one of those. The basic resume that I have that I just really did was somebody that did babysitting in their home, you know, type of thing. So that's self-employment. I mean, so use those kinds of things, volunteer work and school work experiences. Have you had a job? Are you working? Are you? Okay, good deal. So putting all of that in there is going to help them to see. And then use that concisely again to maybe you've worked in 3 different retail places in that skills and abilities. You know, maybe that's 5 years of experience between the 3. You don't need to tell me up in the abilities and skills, you know, what date to what date. Just tell me 5 years. And again, down below, I'm going to see where that 5 years in customer service was. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So information to include the job title, dates of employment, company name, city and state as well. So your employment history, I know this is kind of obvious, but I have a friend, a coworker that didn't realize that they were supposed to do that, and they had their oldest one first, and they went through, and so really just be mindful of that. You want your most recent, and then go backwards in that with the dates. Generally, the last 3 jobs will last 10 years, okay? Whichever comes first. So focus on the most recent jobs and most appropriate to the goal. Focus on qualifications, transferable skills. So that's one thing of like, okay, just because you worked maybe in high school and you did work at Target or you worked at Starbucks or, you know, wherever that was, that you were able, now you want to get into an office setting and you're like, oh, I don't really have that experience. Again, back to customer service. I tell people even some of the places like Starbucks, in training a barista, they get a certification out of that that's not only how to make drinks, but it's the customer service skill. That is a nationally known Fortune 500 company that has just trained you, and you think, I was just a barista and I make coffee. No, you want to put that in there is that you had specific training to customer service as well. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So again, you're not misrepresenting, but that's a whole heck of a lot different. My daughter worked out at a kitchen company, and they were kind of like, oh, here's the, and here's the, and here's the, and then I have my son who got trained as a barista in Starbucks. Was like, that's not how you do that. They're gonna blah blah blah, and, you know. So really, you know, it just depends on where you work and what type of training you've even had. So mention that within there in your history, volunteer work experience, that counts, and I do want to see that. So if you're not volunteering anywhere, and I know this is like a leadership class, so maybe that's even part of what you guys do, but like if you like animals, go down to the Panhandle, you know, what is that called? The Humane Society? Yeah. You know, once you become a volunteer, you can go on your own time. You go in, you write your name on the board. I would say Michelle, and I would check out what dog, and I took them for a walk. You know, there's things that can be on your schedule, I guess is what I'm trying to point out. Not that you have to do that, but find something that at least, even if it's an hour a week, because seriously, sometimes on those resumes, that's what it came down to. Their skills were all great, but I'm also looking for that person, that personality. Does that make sense? And it came down to seriously volunteer work that I saw, that people giving back to their community, because I know they're givers and they're not all me. I want them on my team. So go out and find something if you don't have that. Okay, listing responsibilities, we talked about that. Bullet points, start each line with that action verb. Present tense if you're in the job. Okay, so if you're doing the job currently, you would say like responsible, not responsible. Oh, my mind's going blank. Help me out.
Supervise.
There we go, supervised as opposed to supervised, you know, so you're supervising now to supervising. Thank you. Now you get nervous, you're like, I can't think of any words right now. Okay, the past tense, if you're no longer employed, then vary your choice of verbs as well. So you don't want to say responsible for, or maintain, So tailor your skills and experience to the position for which you are applying. And again, it's just going to have to be that part of your brain that gets into that creative space of how do I use this training in barista, of my customer skills that I had, 25 hours in, that was specifically on how to greet a customer, conflict management, those words that a manager wants to know. You've got some training in that, and you've got paid training in that, and that's going to be less training I have to give you, even though maybe you're going into an office setting. Okay, and be concise while providing enough detail. That's always that balance. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. This is very simple. This is somebody that worked taking out groceries, so they were a bagger. And this is what I just wanted to show you quick, is how you can sit and say they just didn't bag groceries. You really need to be creative, again, without misrepresenting what you did. So this person prepared bag groceries to customer satisfaction, assist loading grocery items into customers' vehicles, and also it's to present, so that's why we're current. Secure shopping carts and other key supplies, provide customer service to average of 60 customers per shift. So that's even telling me, okay, maybe you're working in a mid-sized company. This isn't somebody that just one person comes into the old farmer's market, and I live in a town of 80 people. You know what I mean? So that's a different than, okay, so clean display places, shelves and tabs. So does that make sense of how you can put something together that's going to be really representing a position, but that's not misrepresenting what they had done? And the babysitting job, okay, maintain satisfied clientele of 10 families, provide quality care for children newborn to 12, manage all aspects of business, maintain a safe play environment, communicate with children's parents and guardians about daily activities, I guess you can do this, and regulate children's rest periods. So again, instead of just saying, I babysat, I watched kids, there's a way that you can word these to be helpful. I think you probably need about 2 minutes. Okay, so volunteer work, we kind of went through that, but let them know the type, location, and the hours and dates that you did. So kind of keep track of that, whether it's in your phone, and here's kind of an example. They supplied 80 community service hours at Woodland Towers Retirement Community, January through February. Does that make sense? So giving some detail, maybe even of how many hours. If you're like, okay, by the time you get to putting a resume together and you just started this and you've got 10 hours in, okay, you don't need to put 10 hours, but just say that you are volunteering at this such and such place. Education, you include the city and state if not part of the title, and dates are not necessary. Okay, so that's also something that's going to aid you. Unless they have asked you specifically for that. But even if you are applying to a place that are going to ask for your transcripts, they're going to see it then. And they're pretty serious about you at that point, mostly, okay? So don't put your date of graduation on there today yourself. I think we're almost done. References we talked about, right?
Michelle, if you want to just go ahead and finish,
Yes.
even if she has to leave,
Okay,
start
yeah.
recording it. Okay,
Yeah.
is that all right?
Sounds
Yep.
good, yeah. Nice meeting you, yeah. Okay, so we kind of went through the references. I wouldn't waste the space on references available on the request just because it's wasted space. It's one of those things that when you go to the interview, you're going to take references with you, so they can ask you for them, unless they're specifically, again, in the employment ad or job description that they're asking you for that. So once an employer requests those 3 to 5 references who they can speak to about work habits, I always say prep that person. So of course we always heard call them, let them know. But I also have another, for instance, on the job, in a coaching moment, come back in, I pick up my phone, and they've asked me to be a reference, but it had been a couple months ago. And because my mind is in work mode, you know, so I always say give that person an email, text, phone call, however you have talked to them before as your supervisor, and short and brief. Hey Michelle, do you remember you had said you'd be a reference for me? Is that still appropriate? Is that proper? Can you do that for me? Yes, okay, that would be great. Just want to let you know I have an interview at Starbucks in 2 days. Wanted to give you a heads up. What that's helping me do then, because I got that phone call and I thank you, it's prepping me for that, and then I go, Susan was always on time, she da-da-da-da-da-da-da, I've got it there, so then if I am in work mode, guess what, my short-term memory is gonna come back a whole heck of a lot quicker because I got a phone call a day or two ago, or a text, you know, or an email that tells me that. So help your reference be a good reference. They've said they want to be that reference for you, help them do that. And so it is perfectly fine. Just don't get into a hour conversation with them while they're calling at work, unless they start asking you questions. But okay, we talked about that. Ask about permission before someone for being that reference. And let them know. Okay, so awards and recognitions. Just kind of going back to if you have some, let them be timely, appropriate. If it's an employee of the month, that is an awesome thing to be able to put on your reference. I'm trying to think of some examples. You know, sometimes people are putting in their awards and recognitions that I had a gal raising cats, and I don't know if she bred them. I don't know. I didn't end up having an interview from her because I formed an opinion from the resume about her cats. So it's one of those things, if it's appropriate, tell me about that, because if you are actually running a part-time business in showing cats and bringing cats, and you're doing the office management of that, and you've got somebody showing them across the nation, you know, there's a whole different level of what that looks like than just telling me that you raise cats. Because I go to a personal opinion of, are they going to come in smelling like cats? Are they going to have hair all over? You know, just all those things. Is a crazy cat lady? I don't know. I'm reading a piece of paper and it isn't giving me enough information. So just be very careful about what you do and what you're doing in your free time and what that looks like. I know a gentleman with his resume that he was the mayor, and it was a very small a city, and it was like, I don't know, 50 people or whatever. And so it wasn't even a paid position, but it was a recognized position. It was a voted in position, but it was volunteer work. And it did then coincide the business side of what he was doing with his resume. So if that's, again, that's pertinent, you know, showing me that you're a leader in your community, what you have to offer, even though you may think, oh, it's only a town of 50 people, you know, and I got mayor. Well, no, that is important. So go ahead and put those types of things in there, even though it's not a paid position. Okay, references. These are my funny Mr. Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, and Artie Leprechaun, of just big enough to see it, not too tiny, but all of their information. Again, nowadays, people are even, I've looked at some and then you're thinking, California, but this person, you know, has lived here, and I'm seeing on their resume they've been here for how many years. You know, okay, is this a personal reference? Is this a work reference? So it kind of can tell them. So just be upfront with all that information, and they might want to mail them something. I don't think nowadays people do that. They know they're going to call or email.
Do you ever put like should you put how you know them, like previous supervisor or anything like that, or just their names?
That's a good question. I think that would be helpful. Some people, yeah, if it's a professional reference or a personal reference, I think that would be good. I really try to tell people too, it's just try to stay away from that personal. I mean, if you can get 3 professional references that have supervised you, that know your work, that type of thing, you know, that's absolutely wonderful, and putting those 3 in there like that. And then if you have that one personal reference to add to it, perfect. But I've seen probably more personal. You know, they get to, well, I worked with them. You know, well, yeah, you became friends with them, so I don't know, are they gonna tell me if you showed up on time, or that, you know, you did a good job? No, you know, you could probably pay for this, no.
Right.
So, yeah, that would probably be good, that's a good idea. All right, so using your resume effectively, sending your resume to a person by name, doing the research, find out the name and the title of the appropriate person. If asked to send the resume to an HR or personnel, do so, but also try to send a resume to the person in charge of that department where they work. I know sometimes that's harder to get that information in bigger companies, and especially now that a lot of these are even online and you're applying somewhere out to a corporate company, that's where really you can call the town office, you know, or the town store, and find out who is your general manager, who's your hiring manager, ask that question. So you can also give them to them with a cover letter that states, I have also applied to corporate, I just wanted you to see that. So never send that resume without a cover letter. Finding out if resumes are scanned and format with that in mind. Follow up sending your resume with a phone call if you can. That's a lot of old school too, but it's one of those things that really does truly show, I think, if they're interested. And I just had my front staff taking a note. I would tell them, we're in the hiring process, and I trained them, that staff, to, if they came in with a resume, what did they look like? How did they dress? How did they, you know, did they look at you in the eye? Were they pleasant? Because that's a first impression.
Right.
But then also if they called on the phone, then it was taking down that. I was one of those that said, hey, if I'm available, I'll let you know. I will take that phone call. I wanted to do that. But if I wasn't, I wasn't. And it was just like, take that name down for me. I want to know who's interested. I really did. I wanted to see who's following up on that. Because sometimes people are just putting their, you know,
Sure.
they're trying to do something for unemployment, you know, and it happens. And so, okay, so give a copy of your resume to all networking contacts, and give a copy of your resume to your references. But always, always, always do that resume. So the electronic resume, send as an attachment. I know some people have tried to put it in the email, and then how it's formatted, it comes out, I've got all these words. I don't have time for that. I just don't have time to sit and try to format your resume through it. So just send it as an attachment. I think in nowadays in I'm sure the students, they all know how to do that. But if they're having difficulties in that and putting it in an attachment, you gotta persevere. Somehow you're gonna figure out how to get that to them as an attachment. So, and if you're concerned about that, again, following up with a hard copy and sending that off, but always include that cover letter with it. So the cover letter, it's last but not least. So the cover letter is your opportunity to personalize your resume and target your skills. And it's your marketing statement. So a business letter format, date, name, and address at the top of the letter. Address the letter to a specific person, again, if you can, or a specific title if you cannot find the hiring authority's name. Never use to whom it may concern. I know this is all over the internet, to whom it may concern. And again, this is just back to that personal preference of do your homework. If you really want the job, you're going to be finding out who works there, who's hiring, that kind of thing. And seriously, they could call to my front desk and say, who's your hiring manager? Say, Michelle Wire. You know, that's how easy it is. You know, so if they're finding that out, they're doing some homework and they're getting it on there. So reflect your individuality, but don't appear too familiar. And so we don't want any of that slang. Our texting skills at its finest is not going to be in your cover letter. No LOLs or rolling off or laughing or anything like that. So, useful sentences, correct grammar and punctuation, and keep it brief. 1 page and 3 to 5 paragraphs. And you know, my mind, really, 3 paragraphs is good. You know, unless you are seriously in a profession that you are, gosh, I'm even trying to think, you know, the curriculum, what do they call vitaes? I mean, it's a whole different thing of when you're in, whether it's in education or in the sciences of a doctor or a lawyer, that type of thing, and what that's going to look like. That cover letter is probably going to be looking a lot different than somebody that's just even in management. So sign that sincerely. You're not going to put love you, love you bunches. You know, we don't want to be familiar. It's just being sincerely, respectfully, that type of thing. And use the same paper in your resume as printed on. that is the end. I do have information in packets, I guess, that our office can help with in different areas of interviewing for the job. I know you're going to do that piece of it, but we do help one-on-one with that if people want to come into our office. At the Department of Labor, we are in the state office building that is right next to Safeway. And you can call or just come in and we can make an appointment, but we can do mock interviews. I sit down and help people walk through that. Even just having them have a conversation of what do you feel like you do present well, and what are the areas that you feel you get hung up on in an interview, because a lot of people get nervous when they sit there, and especially if there's 2 or 3 or 4 or a room of 8, you know, even if it's just one. Different personalities react to that differently, and so we can kind of help you coach through that, because if you're thinking about it, you know who you are, you know where your mind is. Even when you're nervous, you can still go back to that recollection because we kind of prepped through all that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be we give you specific questions, but just so you know who you are, what you bring to the table. We can do it something as easy as that, so people don't get scared off and like, I don't know how to do mock interviews, I don't even want to do that. No, it can be a simple conversation that we can have with you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.